afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are and whenever you are watching this. My name is Crickett Rumley, and I am the director of the Film Festival department at the New York Film Academy. And I'm very excited today to represent the Tallgrass Film Festival and the documentary jury, and to be here talking about Zero Gravity with Thomas Verrette. Hi, Thomas.
Hi.
Nice to see you.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I am going to talk a little bit about who you are. You are the writer, director, producer, and editor of the feature Zero Gravity, which has had a tremendous film festival run. And Thomas is a 14-year veteran of the film industry, a former Fox and Disney creative and post-production executive. He is most known for producing the 20-episode World Cup docuseries Phenoms for Fox Sports. He also edited the Goalkeepers episode, which premiered the series at Tribeca. He executive produced the documentary feature Ordinary Gods, co-produced the short comedy series Small Shots, edited the sci-fi feature Parallels, and has brought to us this delightful documentary about children way smarter than me and science. So
way smarter than me too.
It's so fun to watch them think through and solve scientific problems and mathematical equations that I'm not even sure I even fathom what it is that they're talking about there. So yeah.
Yeah, it was it took me a long time to digest a lot of what they were doing and talking about, and then of course how to, make it concise enough to be understood, hopefully by the audience, and that can follow that journey. It's of course a little more complicated than even what's in the film, but those, what was so amazing to me about the experience was that none of them had ever done anything like that before in the beginning, and so to kind of watch them just grow so quickly over the course of that summer, like they were basically just like, sponges with this stuff, like learning a completely new language, and then, thinking critically about it all, and putting ideas and together and testing, testing them out against one another and all that stuff. I mean, it was fascinating for me to see, for sure.
It was so fascinating to me to see their curiosity and commitment and ability to problem solve all at once.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really fun to see.
I mean, like, it was so, I think a lot of that also really stems from Tanner, their coach and educator, really. I mean, his excitement and passion and willingness to kind of be open with the kids too about what he even didn't know, because it was also his first time really doing a lot of coding as well.
Right.
I think put the whole class into kind of like the same group in a really fascinating way, that it sort of allowed them all to work really well together and really figure all that stuff out as a group and collaborate to get where they were trying to go, which is, space. It's just the idea of kids coding satellites in space is like, of course, that's what got me interested in the first place. It's just an insane idea to me.
Right? It is an insane idea. How did you find Tanner, and how did you find this story?
My executive producer, he had a connection with MIT and the Zero Robotics group there, and sort of introduced me to them and the idea of, is there a story here that we could tell? Which immediately, for me, I'm fascinated with science and space and just the ideas, the philosophical stuff, like, how massive the universe is and how small we are, and just where that can kind of take your thoughts. So to me, I was just like, this is I gotta like see what's going on here. It's like sort of an opportunity for me to do like my first space movie, I guess. And basically what happened is I went to the orientation, which is in the beginning of the film, and that's where I met all the teachers and sort of really got the download of what it was that they were attempting to do. And like when all the teachers are kind of like like sort of awestruck about the idea of coding a GPS system around Mars, and that's like, you know, like I'm kind of also hearing that for the first time, you know, while we're shooting that stuff. So that was really, that opening sequence is sort of the beginning of how I got involved in it. That was where it all began, and then Tanner was there, and I interviewed him as well as all the other teachers, but I was looking for an educator that would make me excited. And like, you know, I sort of was thinking when I was a kid, there's just a couple of teachers that I still remember to this day that really had an
Right.
effect on me. And I was looking for somebody that could kind of do that in this circumstance, because I didn't know which kids were going to show up to his class. And so I had to believe that the teacher would really kind of be the anchor to all that stuff, and you know, make it interesting, even if it's not necessarily your cup of tea. So that was kind of how all that happened. And Tanner just gave me all of those feelings and more, really. And it was a little bit of like, well, let's see where this goes. I mean, it's a documentary. There's no script, really. You just kind of like follow your gut quite a bit and see where it takes you.
I feel like you made the best choice possible, because with Tanner, he's new to this process. He's never done it before. So there's something exciting and at stake for him as well as the kids. It's not like he was a seasoned pro who knew. He was a bit of an underdog as well.
Absolutely. And I really wanted that perspective in particular for the story, because you know, coding is kind of alien to me. I'm sure it's alien to a lot of us, and it's also where our future is going. So I kind of thought that if he's picking this up and learning the ropes as we go, it would be much easier for me to convey that process and that learning experience to the audience, essentially. And even for me, like, I mean, I wanted to learn what they were doing as they went, and didn't want it to be so dry, essentially. And yeah, so having a teacher, like a first time teacher getting into coding, I think it is also something related to the Zero Robotics program in particular, is that, you know, anybody can really do that. It's an equitable, free program, and it just takes teachers to sort of sign up to give those opportunities to their you know, their students or classes or communities, really. And that was another reason why I wanted to showcase that, because I think that the more people that know about these types of things, like, the better off everyone really will be in the end. I mean, it's, you know, again, it's just an insane kind of program, you know, coding satellites in space, interacting and touching space at like such a young age. I mean, the fascination for me is just, where do they go now that they've already done that at such a young age, you know?
After space, what frontier is there?
Yeah, where else do you go?
Where do you go next? I thought it was the final frontier. Oh Lord. Okay, so this must have been an amazing discovery then, when you found out about Tanner's grandfather and how he had worked on the Hubble. Can you talk about that?
That's a great question. So I knew in the beginning that Tanner was inspired by his grandfather, and when it came to his fascination of science and space just in general, which is another reason why I chose him, because of just that. I knew that there was some sort of personal connection there, but it wasn't until I actually went and shot with him and his granddad where all that information really came out to me.
Wow.
And yeah, so needless to say, that's just that was an amazing you know, kind of beautiful moment that happened on screen at that time. It was not something I necessarily, like I said, I knew that he was inspired by his grandfather and had NASA stuff around his house, but I did not know his career until I really met him on the day that we went and shot with them.
Did you freak out when you heard that? Were you like dying behind the camera?
Yeah, yeah, of course. That you know, it was just like one of those moments where you're like, I think I'm on the right track here with this story. I mean, like, when those types of things kind of come out in you know, like just so naturally to kind of prop up the story and sort of connect the dots. You know, I'd always had this idea about legacies and sort of how we pass down inspiration and you know, from one generation to the next, and not even necessarily from somebody that we know. It could just be from, you know, like Michael Collins, like, or
Right.
you know, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin and just the moon landing and all that. I mean, there was always an attempt to sort of tie those ideas together, and that was just an example of one where I was like, I mean, you can't, it doesn't get much kind of better than that. It was such a clean, like, way to sort of suggest exactly what I was already trying to thematically do with the film. It was a beautiful moment to happen in front of me, really.
It was a beautiful, beautiful connection. But also I love that moment that you just cited where is it Jack Fisher who realizes that Mike Collins is there, is
Yeah,
asking him a question?
right.
And he's like, wait, what? Hold on.
The Mike Collins, yeah. Yeah, that conversation was also a lucky find, to be honest with you.
Uh-huh.
It was one of the last sequences that got put into the film, and there was an attempt in that sense too to tie in the people that come before us that laid the groundwork for where we can go, and you know, Jack Fisher kind of says it all in such an eloquent way at that moment. He's like, you know, inspiration is sort of unquantifiable, but it is, you know, kind of the foundation for us all. And that's what I hope this film really is. In a way, I hope that it gets passed down just the same way that those ideas do. And I love the fact that the film is, you know, it primarily told through the kids' perspectives, and allows them to be the ones who pass down that inspiration too. I mean, even like the scene with Carol and her little sister Estrella,
Mm-hmm.
and just showing her like her field day basically, and like, you know, the photos of Steve Smith that she took, and you know, that to me is like the core of what the film really is about. So tying that all together in a way with like Mike Collins, and you know, there's all a purpose for all those different threads, because they all are representing the same idea to me, which is sort of how it all came together that way.
I think the space-time continuum has been well represented in this film. So let's talk a little bit about the kids. So you found Tanner. He built this class, or the kids enrolled in this class. They only had 4 weeks, right?
Yeah.
Between the start and the first competition. And so how did you go about interviewing the kids, figuring out who you would follow? Were there how many kids were in the actual course?
I think there were 14 kids total, and the first 2 weeks, actually it was a little faster than that, but yeah, maybe the first like week and a half, we were really shooting with everyone.
Okay.
And interviewed all the kids individually, and sort of just wanted to see how they all worked together and who was engaged, who was excited. And it sort of became clear around the second week who just kind of jumped out, like Advic and Carol and Adrian. They all were well spoken and all came from like different perspectives, and that was sort of how I honed in on where the storylines would go. But again, like that's all. I didn't know I was necessarily going to have 3 student stories within the film in the beginning. I was actually more worried about kids, you know, like not showing up at the end because of whatever reason. I mean, they're kids, like, you know, maybe their parents have something to do that day, or what, you know what I mean? And it's like if you shoot the whole thing and then the one student isn't available like for the finals, even if they got that far, you know what I mean? Then there's no movie. So some of it was also related to just making sure that there was a film at the end of it that could be made. And what was so surprising to me was how engaged they all stayed, and how much it all meant to them by the end. You know, that was like sort of just a natural kind of progression of their own journey through the program I think it was somewhat designed, but it was also a lot of luck. You know,
Right.
I think that all three of them are amazing, and really opened up and gave us, like, you know, an amazing foundation and heart to like their own journeys, and their families opened up, and you know, it really made it all something special. But again, it's all part of the process that you sort of are discovering as you go.
Did you find, I mean, the kids have very different backgrounds, and I did you find it challenging to talk to them about their backgrounds, or what were some of the concerns? I guess that's my question, is what were some of the concerns that you had or challenges you faced in talking to the kids and their families?
I think the biggest challenge was mostly getting them to sort of understand what I was trying to do. You
Okay.
know, like in the beginning, like anybody that's like, well, I would love to shoot more material with you know, your son or daughter, and come into your house and be a part of your life for a little bit. And there's always a
Right.
little bit of a why, why, you know, what are you trying to do here? And so it wasn't that that there was a resistance, but it does take some communication and even collaboration to make sure that, you know, I'm respectful, and especially dealing with kids. That was always something that was on the top of my mind, to make sure that you know, again, that they're respected and their ages are respected in a way that you know, we're trying to tell you know, a, a coming of age story and not really anything else. And in the end of the
Right.
day, and I think that but outside of that, I don't know if it was really that complicated. I mean, to some extent, Carol's family was slightly more difficult, only because of the language barrier for me.
Mhm.
But my DP Carlos is fluent in Spanish, and so he really kind of helped bridge a lot of that stuff for those sequences, and with Carol and
That's
her
really
family.
fortuitous.
Sorry, what?
I'm sorry, I said that that's quite fortuitous. Because I do think that there are some really lovely moments with especially Carol's family, where they are saying, we really don't know what this is, but fully support her pursuing it. I thought that
Yeah, you know, I mean, like even things like they were, I loved how supportive all of their families really were about this insane idea. You know what I mean? It was sort of like that encouragement, I feel like, means a lot to a kid. Um, you know, like I remember when I was a kid, like I used to draw dinosaurs all the time because of Jurassic Park, and then my mom saw that and was like, well, then you should go take drawing classes. You know, and like that kind of encouragement got me to pursue things like filmmaking, and you know, that it was an exploration of kind of your art, like my artistic side,
yeah.
that was encouraged to me. And so seeing that being done on a like with STEM and in this environment, and also I think everybody just being like so close to Silicon Valley, that there's an obvious need for those types of skills in that area if they want to stay and survive. And all of that was really kind of beautiful to see, because I mean, I don't have kids of my own, and so some of this was fascinating just from a observer to me, to just see that, again, that all that growth and how fast that they grew up, and in just, you know, what they accomplished in such a short amount of time. I mean, like I think that that's at the end of the day what I hope comes out of this is sort of encouraging people to follow their dreams and chase those ideas that they may not know if they can do, but you don't know if you don't try. It's that first step somewhere is really what I hope comes out of it.
Oh, I think so. And I think that the excitement, because it wasn't just the class, it was as the story progressed, we see more and more kids getting involved. And then you have that moment where, okay, that must have been heartbreaking, the moment where they realized that they didn't win California. And I was so sad for them. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Like what it was like to be there when they found that out, and the way that Tanner handled it?
Yeah, what I loved about that moment so much, being in the room, was actually how, yeah, they were a little like, bummed that they didn't win, but they were also really excited about how well they did. And that was like the moment that like really brought a tear to my eyes in the process, and even like cutting that sequence together. And then of course, when they get excited about collaborating and working as a team with the Gallant Academy kids that won the state, and like all of that is so on point with where I think progress is made, and like just the ideas of working together and that being a part of life, that you pull yourself up when you fall down and keep going and keep trying. They did all of that on their own, and I think that was like kind of the most beautiful part of the process for me, honestly, even more so than the finals themselves, was sort of seeing all that happen because of their experience up to that point, and Tanner's leadership, I think, in that class, and how he sort of ingrained that stuff in them, really early in. So
Oh my gosh, Thomas, I'm getting chills thinking about that, because they did it so fast too, didn't they?
yeah, no, I think
Fast.
like, yeah, the turnaround between in real life, between how fast like they found out and then when they started collaborating, was like, I think it was the next day actually. And that was also one of those fate things really with the film, because the Gallant Academy was down the road, and there's teams all across the state in California competing. So if that team was like, let's say in San Diego or Los Angeles, that sequence wouldn't exist at all in the same way. It would have been through Zooms, and it would have been nowhere near as visually compelling, at least. Sort of like the same process of like going to the theater and watching a movie versus watching it through a virtual festival. I mean, I'm happy to be doing this Q&A, but I really wish I was there to be there with the audience. It would have been more like that. So
I get it.
Again, just how fast that they kept going is it was incredible.
Okay, so this just occurred to me. This was a team sport, this process, and you have a background in covering and sports teams. Were there any parallels that you draw now between what these kids did and the way they operated versus sports teams that you've covered in the past?
There are many parallels. I mean, I honestly don't know if I would have been able to make this movie had I not done the Phenoms series about the World Cup, because that was my first major documentary that I was involved in, and learning how, I guess, just the structure, that kind of just competition, I guess, and it laid the foundation for what this will ultimately be for me. I didn't know that obviously at the time, but Zero Gravity has the story structure of any other sports movie, really, at the end of the day, and that's by design, because they were, they're coding in a competition, and there are stages to that they have to get to, and then through finals and things like that. So I knew that, at least from an editorial perspective, that there were certain beats and pacing things that would need to happen within the story in order for it to work. Because and so if I treated it like a sport as much as possible, and on that that foundation, I felt like that would be familiar enough where people could get along and go along with the coding and the other aspects of it that they need to pick up along the way.
Right.
Right. And the one thing that was really different for this, though, is that, when you're doing any other sports, program, documentary, you generally don't have to explain the game too much. If it's a basketball documentary, I don't think you're going to stop and tell people like what happens if they shoot from the 3-point line or not. You know what I mean? Like, it's sort of inherent to what you're doing. This was way more complicated in that I had to sort of explain a game that nobody had ever heard of in an environment that's virtual, but then will be in space. And there's just a lot to go along with that. So the way I kind of tried to handle it was to sort of do it a little bit piecemeal, and sort of like, in the beginning when they're explaining the game, there's no part of me that expects the audience to pick up on all those details at that moment.
Right.
It's just that you need to hear certain words enough times before you start to recognize them. And by the time the kids explain it, you've heard all these things like, SPS and the large items, or it's like, and however they explain it, it can make sense by the time you need to know what it is that they're doing.
Yeah.
So
it's that repetition and reinforcement. Teach people what it is that we're actually talking about here.
Yeah, but I didn't want to stop the movie ever to explain that stuff either. Because I just felt like the momentum would die unless it came from the kids in particular. So that was all like sort of a big trial and error, and a long road in editorial to figure out how best to convey all these ideas that I think everybody takes in their own experience and understandings to the film. So some people might get it faster than others, and that, like, just trying to balance all that to make it all compelling for as many people as possible was absolutely a challenge.
Absolutely. Well, it was really fascinating to watch, and for me, it was really about the emotions of the characters and tracking them and kind of seeing how things landed for them and how they were experiencing this story.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it was like, if it didn't come from the place of like for lack of a better word, on the ground with the students and their stories and their journey, like if you're not involved in rooting for them, then all that other stuff doesn't matter. Like, you have to fall in love with the characters, and I did, and I believed in them, and that's why I made the movie, and hoped that it would work for audiences. And then the astronauts too, they were all great and really supportive. But I really tried my best to always be like as much as possible in the moment throughout the film, and not sort of go so high level all the time with so these third-party interviews and things like that. Like, if I was going to interview an astronaut, it had to be like when they were a part of the story in a way.
Well, I did want to ask you how you got that access, and then also these stunning images from space and of the astronauts. What was the process of getting those images, licensing those images? What did you have to do for the documentarians in the room?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think it really depends on exactly which shots we're talking about. So most of NASA's material is part of the public domain, and so basically you can use most of the stuff that they release as long as you provide credit, essentially. What was interesting for me, though, is I was like looking for very specific type stuff. So I emailed them and like would be like, hey, where can I find ISS photography or this footage of the parade from Apollo 11, and they would send me back like links to their own archive and things like that. But it was really relatively easy. The NASA stuff was because again, it's mostly in the public domain. And then, you know, some of it, I just got lucky, to be honest with you, finding like red footage from the ISS that some of the astronauts had shot, and was just
Right.
like, I don't know, like looking at that raw material as opposed to something that's already been released was like, you know, it's totally different than like seeing something that's already in a reel. You know, when you're like just looking at this camera, zooming in, zooming out, doing whatever it's trying to focus on in space. It just really, I mean, I haven't been to space, but that's the closest to the overview effect I'll probably ever have.
Oh,
But
so
it's just
beautiful.
incredible to like kind of, you know, study that stuff even. I mean, it really opened up my eyes, and I was making the edit mostly during the middle of the pandemic. And so doing this whole thing was like kind of therapeutic kind of in a way, because it sort of was so, the story of those kids and what they kind of believed in and represented was so uplifting to me that it really helped, I think, in some of those darkest days of you know, for everyone, even kind of just like see the light at the end of the tunnel. And if anything, I hope that's what comes out of this now for the audiences, is like, you know, we've all been through something pretty traumatic over the last like 2 years in particular, and you know, we have a opportunity to grow and do better from here on out. So hopefully that inspiration comes across.
I think it definitely does. And also, I think this is a great place for us to wrap up our conversation, because it does give you hope for the future, for the youth of the future, the overview effect. I feel like the overview effect is, I wish it was something that we talked about more in society, and that it was something that we could see. Yes, I really did love seeing those images.
Thank
Um,
Thank you.
so
I agree with you. I mean, you know, that's the beauty of like maybe making film sometimes, is you sort of just follow your own curiosities. And one of mine has always been space, and you know, just even the opportunity to kind of talk to, like, you know, astronauts who have been, you know, to space and seen it themselves, and what they think about the world and how fragile it looks. It's just like, it really hits you, that, you know, that we have a lot of work to do to make sure that we can continue going in the right direction, I think, and providing you know, leaving the world a little bit better than we inherited it, you know, at the very least, you know. So it's all wrapped into the reason why I made the movie, I think, is because I was just so taken by the journey of these 3 kids in particular.
well, Thomas, thank you so much for answering these questions for me today. I know the Tallgrass audience and future YouTube audiences will really enjoy it. One last thing. You're not going to be able to join us at Tallgrass, but can you tell us why? You've got a really great excuse for not joining us.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I won't be there because the next morning we are premiering Zero Gravity at the United Nations Association Film Festival, which is in Palo Alto, right next to NASA Ames, and also where we shot the majority of the film with the kids. And so this will be the first time that we get to all share in this experience together, since we were in that classroom, you know, 4 years ago. So it should be a really special, exciting moment for us all to kind of see each other again, and you know, relive it together in a way, and then have some laughs and you know, catch ups and everything like that. So
I know you'll have an amazing time. So thank you. Thank you, Tallgrass, and best of luck with your next project, Thomas.
yes, thank you very much. I just wanted to say one last thing, is that you know, if you guys all like the movie, you know, please follow us on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, you know, whatever's your social platform of choice. It's at Zero Gravity Doc, and our website is zerogravitydoc.com as well. DOC.
Zero Gravity Doc, DOC.com.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you very much, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.